David Wilson. I'm president of Pure Social World and a member of the Human Energy Science Advisory Board, and I'm here to talk about the master class that was conducted earlier this year. And first, I want to provide some background. Point one: Teilhard was a respected scientist during his lifetime, but now known almost entirely for his spiritual quality, and either forgotten or dismissed by hard evolutionary scientists. And whenever I use the word hard, I put big scare quotes around it because I'm not privileging hard evolutionary science. This came up during day one when there was a question of one of the plenaries. Is it not the case that that Teilhard is just disparaged by the likes of Richard Dawkins and so on, and it is the case. Why would this be? It's because the modern synthesis, as it's called, was also the great constriction. Even though Darwin knew nothing about genes, he defined natural selection in terms of variation, selection, and heredity without knowing anything about mechanisms. With the advent of genetics, the study of evolution became devoted almost entirely to genetic evolution. So around the world, for experts and novices alike, I say the word evolution, they hear the word gene. And it's against that background that evolution has no purpose, that organisms just vary randomly, that only the immediate environment does the selection, and there's just no space for Teilhard's grand vision. But I'm happy to report that now, in the present, it's a whole new ball game. Now, evolutionists have returned to basics. They now define evolution as Darwin did, as any mechanism that combines those three ingredients of variation, selection, and replication. We call this generalized Darwinism. And of course, what that opens the door to is the study of cultural evolution, human cultural evolution, in addition to genetic evolution. The idea that evolution is a multi-level process. We've gone away from the reductionism and individualism of the last 70 years, not just in biology, but across the board. And we have a much more holistic view of life, based in part on the advent of complex system science and multi-level selection in evolutionary biology, which in turn leads to the concepts of major evolutionary transitions. And that was covered by Terry Deacon in the first plenary of this conference. So now we can begin to think of our species as a symbolically eusocial species, as Terry loves to put it. And all of this is so conducive to Teilhard. So Teilhard now is back, you might say. And the work that we've done at Human Energy, and I would say my primary role, was to kind of reconnect Teilhard to modern evolutionary science. That has resulted in an academic article titled Reintroducing Teilhard de Chardin to Modern Evolutionary Science. It's a Target article with commentaries published in the academic journal Religion, Brain and Behavior, available on the Human Energy website on the Science of the Noosphere page. And the commentaries include quite a few people from Human Energy, including Terry Deacon, Clement Vidal, Ilya Delio, and others. And so it's a great place to learn about this. Then in addition, what we've done at Human Energy is to complete a series of 24 video conversations with myself and Alan Honeck. And Alan has been such a great partner with me and then with Human Energy. And so these video conversations, they trace the arc from the original life to the future of the internet age, a total of 31 viewing hours, each one a pretty darn deep dive into the, my members of the Noosphere class here are nodding their heads saying, yes, it was a deep dive. We had to hold our breath for a long time. It was truly the equivalent of a graduate level seminar. And I think this is a milestone which we really need to pause to appreciate. The authority of Teilhard's spiritual worldview depends upon its scientific legitimacy. That's why it commanded so much attention back then. And if you don't have that legitimacy, then he just becomes another New Age thinker.
Yeah.
So to have established, largely reestablished that legitimacy is a big deal. Also, this does not mean that he was right in every detail. This is a very important part. We should treat Teilhard in the same way that we treat Darwin. We love Darwin, but we do not sanctify him. We do not treat him as a sage. We do not say that every word is God's truth. And so we know when he was wrong. And so there's a distinction between Darwin's theory and Darwin the person. That's how we should treat Teilhard. We should not hang on every word. And I was having breakfast with Ilya. And that was reflected in Ilya's talk, plenary talk. And when I had breakfast with her this morning, she wholeheartedly agreed with that. So isn't it wonderful that we can be independent enough in our own thoughts that we could actually ask the question, what was Teilhard reaching for? And then how do we pursue it without necessarily tethering ourselves to him unnecessarily. So he was a great thinker, but not a sage. Well, now that we've created this authoritative body of material, who will read them? Who will view them? And much of human energy's communication strategy is reflected in this image here, where, of course, we know that all of us, and especially young people, we say, are just so distracted, so much being bombarded by so much that it's just so hard to get their attention, our attention, all of our attention. And so therefore, faced with that, then the material must be short. We have the wonderful series of short videos produced by Brian, and some of the research that's being done with college students involves short exposures to the material and then focus groups and things like that. So I'd like to talk about a commitment watershed, where on one side of the mountain we have this problem, and so it's all make it quick. But on the other side, we have I can't get enough. Ben lives on the other side. Ben can't get enough of Teilhard and devotes his life to it. And so it's a very important question, is how can we get people to move to the other side of the commitment watershed? That's where we want them. That's where the real action and achievements will be done, by leading people to the other side of the commitment watershed. And that's what the master class was all about. So the master class was free. That's the good news. The bad news was that, and they were told from the beginning, at the very beginning, it's just like free, but a commitment required. You need to be prepared to work comparable to a semester-length college course. 10 weeks, 2 90-minute sessions per week, homework, 3 hours of viewing. We want you to get a weekly reflection. We're going to give you a digital platform so you can interact between sessions. We'll give you the opportunity to form into extra groups, and also the opportunity to participate in scientific research, which will be our afternoon session. So a great opportunity that requires a commitment. We were aiming for 100 people, which seemed ambitious to us, and we did even better. And so here's another milestone. We made this ambitious offering, and they came in large numbers. 180 people registered. And now that it's over, we had, as I'll document, extraordinary participation, desire to remain engaged, and especially to act upon the noospheric worldview. Because, of course, this needs to lead to action. This needs to lead to action at all scales, ultimately the global scale. And so we did succeed in crossing the commitment watershed for these people. Now, one thing we did, which I'm going to have you do, is please turn to your neighbor and take turns completing the sentence, I am 10 times. So turn to your neighbor and let's complete the sentence. I am 10 times. You should be able to do this in less than a minute. Yeah.
Are you in this class? Yes, likewise.
Isn't that a isn't that a wonderful exercise? And that's what we had. That's what we had the class do in the registration. We had the class do, and here's the word cloud from the I am exercise for the people that joined the class. And so please remember this, because if you want an icebreaker when you're giving a talk, this is the one.
Yeah.
I mean, is this not a way to really just kind of become intimate with the person next to you? And rather by ticking up boxes, your gender, your this, your that, which we also did. So we have that information. To begin with the I am exercise, that just basically signal from the very beginning that there's what we're here to do has meaning to us. Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. It has meaning to us. Who are we? Is basically who are you, and who you are. The first nominations were so personal. I am a mother, student, husband, father, lover, passionate, world, researcher, churcher. So what a great way to start a 10-week journey together. So here's just some documentation of commitment. 180 people registered. I would say, in terms of attendance to the Zoom session, it settled in and was quite consistent between about 80 people or so. That's the Tuesdays and the Thursday session. And this does not mean that there were just only 70 people engaged, because we're all busy, and so people often would say, I'm loving this, but I have to skip this one, and so on and so forth, because of course this was being fit in people's very, very busy lives. And the 90-minute sessions, they all went to 2 hours. So it was just like, we'll add an extra 30 minutes, and almost everybody stayed for the 2 hours. It was remarkable. The weekly reflections, which were posted in a reflection gallery so that everyone could read them. Then again, upwards to 70 to 80 people were just committed to writing carefully what was happening inside their heads. And as we'll see this afternoon, this is data, a fossil record, a linguistic fossil record for every person on the journey that they were taken during the course. We provided the opportunity to form into special interest groups, subgroups. We had no idea what the energy would be for that. As it turns out, 13 groups formed that also met weekly and to discuss special topics. And you see substantial numbers in each one. And for each one, there was a digital platform using Hilo, which is great. Everyone should know about Hilo, and Zoom, and using Zoom. And then an artistic dimension just emerged. Also, the idea that we should do breathing activities. So we didn't put that in. This is very much on the sciencey end of the noosphere, but the spiritual end of the noosphere asserted itself. Like from the very beginning, the more spiritually oriented people just said, could we begin with some centering exercises? And so of course we said sure, and it was wonderful. So and then the artistic dimension, including our Spotify playlist and an art gallery. It was just amazing. And so without further ado, I think we have 5 members of the class here to report in their own words on the experience. And so I would like to invite them all to come and sit in the front. And then we'll then have enough time at the end for just a Q&A among us and with the rest of the audience.
Well, I loved this masterclass. I just loved it. And I think it was a kind of a great attractor. It just pulled people in. It attracted people through all kinds of channels, I think, to one place, and I think it's going to have huge repercussions for a lot of us down the line. But I was writing a book about the universe as an involved entity, exploring the fact that the universe behaves more like an organism than like magically it self-complexifies to an extraordinary extent and all else, and exploring the idea that that's because it may be the result of an evolutionary process at the level of the universe, is Darwinian evolution. But it's an old idea that never gained traction, and I think unfairly so. So I was writing this book, I was very obsessed with this, and Teilhard really felt like a kindred spirit. Like when I was reading a bit of Teilhard, I was reading Phenomenon of Man and Human Phenomenon, and really resonating with it. And then one of the people, but I'm writing the book in public, so one of the people that was following my journey writing this book, Ken Frickglass, sent me an email saying, "Oh, do you know there's this masterclass coming up about Teilhard and Noosphere?" And I thought, "Ooh, that sounds really in my territory, you know." And I found out a little more about it, and then I signed up for it. So I was pulled into it by others, you know, and then it was just, you had a bunch of scientists that I wanted to talk to, that I wanted to connect with in the masterclass. It was almost like it was set up to help me.
Yeah,
achieve
I
my
might just
goals.
say that when we talk about a class, we think that there's like teachers and students, but this works quicker. The students were an amazing bunch in their own right, and I don't want to shame anyone by talking about the talents of not everyone. You know, there could be housewives and so I'm not saying that everyone has to be be accomplished in a conventional sense of the word, but so many of the members of the master class, such as yourselves, were very, very accomplished people, writers, scientists, deep spiritual practice, and so it was very egalitarian in terms of the that's why we call them members, and not we didn't use the word student.
It was a very flat hierarchy. I mean, I learned a lot from some of the students, because some of the students knew a huge amount in their field, you know, as well as I did from the actual lectures and the discussions with the technically the teachers. Yeah, it was a very rich experience, very, very rich experience. And it turned out that a couple of scientists that I made connections with, researching the book and talking, were actually part of the masterclass. Clement Vidal, I had no idea he was going to be part of the masterclass. I was like, oh my God, I've talked to Clement by emailing. So it really pulled people in, and I think he did that with lots of other people. I think there was a kind of there was a need for something like this, and you made it happen, and that pulled in people that needed it. You know? So I found it really enriching. I've made lots of contacts from it that are useful for the book. I've enriched the ideas of the book from the conversations I've had. It's really keeps playing out in my life. I've ended up coming to this conference because I proposed a talk about it because I think there's a really good fit between the ideas I'm writing about and Teilhard. I think Teilhard would have loved the idea of an evolved universe, of a Darwinian development of the universe. His whole idea that the universe is God coming into being really fits with this hypothesis. It's a beautiful bringing together of science and religion, and saying that you're not in conflict. You're just describing the same phenomenon from different angles. And this is a beautiful. The masterclass was a beautiful place to explore this and discuss this. And you had the scientists and the people and the spiritual people and the religious people all in the same space and you designed it beautifully so there was no conflict between them. They were able to translate each other's languages into each other's languages so that it was so you really created a beautiful thing, and I'm very grateful.
Well, thank you. I think that's a part we can thank Teilhard for that a little bit. Because he did.
Yeah.
And now we're kind of bringing the modern science into it. Then
I would have loved it.
and I think that there's a tension aspect to that, which is that some members of the class were coming in mostly from the science side, might have not known anything about Teilhard. That was true for our speakers, by the way. So isn't it interesting that when we assemble this series and we pick the scientists that we want to feature, many of them, although their work was so relevant, knew nothing about Teilhard. They thought they were studying major evolutionary transitions or something. And so Teilhard was new to them. And for those that were coming in from the spiritual wing, then very often, and no surprise, knew little about the science. And I think when we look at attitudes among the, over 100 people taking the class, then each one with their own worldview and their attitudes about science, spirituality, and the relation between them being, guess what? Heterogeneous. And so there were some individuals which wanted, no truck with spirituality. And some very spiritually oriented people which were, found the science challenging. And what we hope can happen, and what we hope to have documented with the scientific research, was that actually worldview evolution, people inside change, we hope. And since we studied it, we'll know one way or the other. So I know it.
Great.
So, Mary, whatever.
Okay. I think right now I might assert some of that autonomy and ask everyone to sit and breathe for just a few breaths. Just relax. We did this every session in class, and we haven't done it yet today. So I won't do a guided meditation, and anyone who doesn't like breathing exercises, as we learned in the class, some people just don't like them, you can just check out and breathe at your own leisure. Now, if you want to keep breathing quietly and ignore me, feel free to do so. It's just that lovely. And I didn't mean to do this when I set this up, but that does lead into how I got into this class a little too neatly, is that I lead a study group at the Systems View of Life. The study group is called The Breath of Life, because in that general systems theory, they return to that motif, breath of life, over and over again. First, as cellular metabolism, then as cognition in the embodied and enacted sense of cognition, and then in spirituality as they bridge mysticism and science, and then at a global scale of this planet breathing together. So that class is nicknamed Capra Course, because Fritjof Capra teaches it, and I was facilitating, it's an undergraduate level class, I was facilitating, and Ken Frickless took that class, and that's how I met him.
That's how
Yes.
you followed my thing.
Yes. He recommended you as one of the funniest writers he'd ever read. And I'm working on a piece of humor, so then Ken and I started talking about that. Now Julian knows about it. At Capra Course, students and participants, because my study group is one of about a dozen, because this course is all over the world. It's all online. There's people from about 40 countries usually enrolled. And students would tell me about Teilhard, so I just had heard of him, but those students tended to come from the hard spiritual side, and they
Hard spiritual
side. And I'm this funny creature where I was raised Catholic, but then I studied here at Berkeley at College in Evolution, so I went to Bible study, but my mother left Catholicism because she said that she believed in laws of physics, and the Catholic Church was a mess. So I was this mess. I was studying evolution, but then Bible study just felt kind of nice. So I did both at the same time. Then just left the Christianity stuff on the side. I was like, oh, I read the Tao Te Ching, and I was like, I'll just stick with this for a while. But I kept a strong meditation and dream journal practice. So I had pretty profound spiritual experiences that I didn't have a good framework for. And I kept encountering students who came from the hard spiritual side, and I was always just very leery of it because I'd read some authors in the spiritual genre, and I was like David Sloan Wilson often says, how well does this worldview comport with the empirical evidence that we've amassed. And there's plenty of worldviews that don't. And like some writers, they'd sort of gesture to quantum mechanics, they gesture to evolution, but not know what they're talking about and say they didn't know what they're talking about. I was like, what are we doing? So Teilhard to me like seemed like he would irritate me in that way, so I just like didn't read him. But then Ken and Lauren Hebert and we all wanted to take David Wilson's class. I was like, okay, I'll come along. I'm here for David Wilson and Michael Levin, the biologist. This is what I'm interested in, but I'll come along and like see what Teilhard is about. So I love Teilhard's writing. And then, I don't know what you're talking about, and there's no conflict between everybody in the class. I thought there were pitched battles that...
Incredibly polite pitch battles.
No.
Compared to, there are pitch battles on this earth right now,
Yeah.
worse.
So,
I grew up in a tougher environment.
so like coming from this place where there's an undergraduate systems study class, I think that class did offer a framework that would actually have eased some of the tensions, given people common language. Like people would be more prepared to talk about a biloop membrane and also about a spiritual experience. I felt like this class was deep end, and that whole concept of holding one's breath, I think, could be alleviated by maybe saying that folks they can do both. So that's why I came into this. I didn't tell you guys because I didn't want to handle any more administrative burden than I already had with the music group, and I didn't want to make anyone jealous. Is that Ken, Lauren, and Jillian and I formed our own subgroup on Hilo, but we kept it secret because you can do that. And it was called Coffee and Cookies because Lauren Hebert has this essay about cultivating worldview, and she says, wouldn't it be great if we could all just bake some cookies, brew some coffee, and get together and workshop this? Like, what is a worldview and how do you cultivate one? So I named the group Coffee and Cookies for that essay. We only met once, about 80% of the way through the class, but we're going to meet again.
That was a good meeting.
It was a good meeting. It was productive.
Yeah, the secret groups.
Yeah, so you don't even have a measure. It's like, this class, it was a social workout. We didn't ever organize like these Coffee and Cookies. I like that there were only 4 people because 4 people is a good social bubble, like a good workable group. We never at Capricorns people form those. You have a group of maybe 10 people that you go every week as your study group. This class, there were 180 people who were all very interesting, and in the breakout groups of those 2-hour sessions, just rapidly exchanging websites and like information. And it was like, whew, this is, I'm an introvert. And so like all season, I've just been like, all right, that's a lot of people. And now I'm at a conference. And it was good, but it was a lot of work. And then I did the music group as well with Emily. And that was, I got a lot of exercise in
Say just a little bit about the music playlist, why you thought of it, and how people contributed to it.
Yeah. So I'm getting more training in music now. Most of my background is in dance because I didn't have to carry any instruments and it was just very accessible. So I love music, but I have 1 degree in social science, and there's some social scientists who believe that music moves faster, that the conversation in music, like it's another knowledge system, and like our talk this morning, it's not so intellect focused, it accesses, there's more ways to know. So I felt that music would give us an avenue of expression and communication that we don't do in the 90-minute or 2-hour Zoom session. So I already for Capricorns had kept a Spotify playlist for those reasons. At Capricorns, people don't really participate in it. I have one, and people tell me they like it, but they don't really like add to it. I think they feel sufficient in Capricorns. Yeah, but here I just set up a blank one, told people it was there, and like within minutes, there were people populating it with their music. And we ended up having these sort of volleys where people would like DJ a set. They put on like 5 songs that were thematic. So it was just this, and then there were 2 playlists because one was on Spotify, one was on YouTube, and YouTube had video as well. People were putting original music, people were putting all kinds of like the genre diversity. I had this conversation with Emily, and she's got 2 degrees in music. I felt like the music playlist gave us a moment to do as Walt Whitman says, is like, do I contradict myself? Like I contain multitudes. And so the music playlist let us exercise that for the Noosphere of the many ways of knowing being in this really, you could go on a journey in these playlists. So the playlists are still up. My Spotify handle is Mariel. Although if you search me, it might be kind of hard to dig for, but look for Science of the Noosphere on Spotify and you find the playlist.
Yeah.
I think the YouTube one is still up too.
I was at a conference in Chicago while the masterclass was in progress. I took a long walk along Lake Michigan, and I listened to the playlist. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So shall we? Are we?
I think
Would you
that's
like more?
good.
Is there more?
I feel like I had a hand in the podcast coming out. Did I? I don't know. Okay, I did. So there's like you guys didn't have any video, like visuals, so then we had you guys make the podcast, and people have really appreciated that. I've listened to the course twice. I almost did it for a third time on the way here, but I decided to be myself, not outside. So I think I'll leave it at that. That's it. Anyway, great work, everybody.
That's fine. Okay.
Yeah, one thing that a great deal stands out for me about this course, of course. One thing I'd like to start with was I felt touched by the commitment that so many different people brought for 11 weeks, and I mean this rhythm of meeting twice for 2 hours, it syncopated the week. And I felt that there was so much passion, interest, and goodwill brought by everybody to everybody.
Almost everybody.
and also, for me, an important aspect of how much I enjoyed being with the group was, in fact, the quality of presence of Lauren. I found that Lauren, Lauren, in a way, I felt held the group. And that was because of the warmth, not only the expertise, but the warmth that she brought. And
Who's Lauren?
Lauren's there.
Lauren, she was the.
Lauren is a
I'm
really
using scare quotes a lot now. She was the teaching assistant and research assistant, but as we see, she was much more.
She was much more.
I know who she was.
I feel that she held the group, and she was so graciously responsive to everybody in the group as well. So for me, this softened the format of digital, which for me still is. I am so much of an analog person. I'm so much of an embodied experience person that translating into digital, I still find loses so much, and I can never feel quite comfortable with it. So I found that Lauren's embodied warmth and presence, created a great deal of extra beauty. Yeah.
I want to say that, because the technology was good, Hannah was good, the structure was good, everything was good, but our actual real interface with the course was Lauren, and she was fantastic, and her attitude and her personality and she cared, So every time you communicate with the course, you felt somebody cared. It was really good.
Yeah, what I also really appreciated was, again, the quality of presence of the speakers. I appreciated that they were willing to participate in the breakout rooms. And of course, there was a special privilege to happen to be partnered up with one or the other. And in terms of the breakout rooms, I mean, it was an adventure every time, right? And again, an adventure where there is a face you have never seen before, really, other than in the gallery, but that remains so abstract, So all of a sudden, you are there with another person you don't know, but what you do know is that you are both guided by the desire to be there, by the desire to engage together in exploring questions of, if I use Noosphere now just as an umbrella term, and all the microcelia all of the web of thoughts and intuitions that it grew, So everybody was engaged in one part or another of those tangible, subtle ways in which the notion of the noosphere grew and shifted in all of us. What brought me to this class, to this course in the first place, well, I have been steeped in the work of Derb Jardin, Thomas Berry, Brian Swim, Mary Evelyn Tuckett, and I've also been I've been teaching at CIS for about 30 years. I've been colleague and close friends of Brian's, and so this gave me also a chance to know about the Human Energy project from the get-go, and really participate in the sense of following it. And you see, my maybe overarching passion really is the third story. It wasn't so much thematized, other than through Brian in his lecture. Otherwise, it wasn't so much thematized in our course. But for me, it continued to guide me in a way through. And in my own classes at CIS, I participate in making this third story, in attempting to make this third story more widely known. You see, and so if I want to just kind of briefly characterize what about the third story ignites me so much, and by the way, concurrently with masterclass, I also took the course Science, Spirituality, and the Noosphere that Brian taught together with Matthew Fox, and that overlapped for 7 weeks. So so it became just this fantastic of both scientific and spiritual and philosophical aspects. So in my own way of absorbing, it could gel and form in different ways from both classes. But so what I understood again more viscerally, or again new, was what fascinates me so much is how the original creativity and potential for consciousness, intelligence, without now trying to justify why I use these terms in regard to the very beginning of the universe, you see, but to hold the knowing that this initial creativity has been at work throughout every single process of evolution, from galaxies to stars to planets, and so on, and then to life, and this is something I had not really thought about so much before. How within life, initially, every evolutionary step, every step in terms of greater complexity would lead to different species, to a new species, or a new biological feature of a species, with every, throughout the entire evolution of life, until the human. You see, and I mean the fact that with Homo sapiens, I could say the evolution of the universe through the human did not lead to new species. It led to an utterly different quality of evolution, and that just ignites me. It led to cultural evolution, cultural spiritual evolution. You see, and to really get it that since I could say the universe, life, evolved in us a type of consciousness that allows us to be reflectively aware and to be reflectively aware of the entire cosmos, to really understand the exquisite qualities and potential of our consciousness, and the fact that knowing our own consciousness, we can consciously participate in further refining it. See, and that, I mean, to me, that just is such a how should I say? It's such a beautiful, exciting task, responsibility, task, gift, privilege that we have. And so that, yeah, and you see, so as I was musing in my writing and throughout the weeks, I mean, those 4 hours we met, of course, they leaked out into many more hours of just musing about these things. And so one of the things that I began to pay more or new attention to was how, since the potential of consciousness and the initial creativity is, let me see, hold on, how do I put this? I lost I had it and I lost it. Give me a second. Yeah. So in terms of the continued cultural evolution, cultural refinement, unfolding evolution of the human, what I kind of began to reflect on more precisely again was, I believe that this cultural evolution can and needs to unfold both within the individual and therefore in the cooperation of individuals. I mean, first of all, we are our the most immediate locus of experience, right? So evolution and refinement of experience, of awareness needs to begin here. It needs to begin here, in my view, but it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. So I got more and more fascinated by holding this notion that consciousness evolves both, and can and must evolve both within ourselves, and consciousness continues to evolve critically, to a critical extent, in groupings of humans. You see, so these two levels in which consciousness unfolds, that to me is just fascinating, because then the boundary or the membrane, the boundary between this personhood that I call I, and this group that I call we, the boundary becomes, from the perspective of consciousness and evolution of cultural being, becomes a membrane. You see, just a membrane, and this membrane is what you call this, permeable from both directions. The evolution of the individual will radiate out into the evolution of the group, cultural evolution, intelligence, consciousness, and the cultural evolution of the group will radiate back to the individual. So this interplay is something that has just totally fascinated me, and that it was alimented in part by our work. I mean, in part by very much also, of course, by Brian Swim's work with Matthew Fox, and by what all those things evoked in me. And so I've loved those 11 weeks of really almost total immersion. And I think back at it with a sense of richness and gratitude and fondness.
Wow. So first of all, let me thank you for such I think it shows you just how deep this was in terms of this inner journey that took place. So that was so eloquent. Ellen, let's go straight to you.
Sure. So I'm Ellen Rigsby, and I'm a professor of communication at St. Mary's College and an education consultant to Human Energy. And in my consultant role, really from the time that David Sloan Wilson finished doing this series of interviews with scientists and other scholars, he had been saying, this could be a masterclass. We could do a masterclass on the Noosphere. And I kept saying to Ben, I have to take this class. I have to take this class. I have to take this class. And when we finally got it going, right, I really want to echo my panelists' experiences. It was a profound sense of, there are all these people out there who have this interest. And the challenge of all these people who share this interest want to sort of take it in their particular direction, right? Which can be a challenge in any group dynamic. And like going through this process, there was the profound kind of transformation through the movement of individual to the group impact that Sophia was talking about. And so in my experience of the class, it's very similar to the panelists so far. I kept thinking, okay, so what are my next steps? What am I going to do with this? And so in working with a couple of class members, we decided we were going to try to have an undergraduate version of this experience. And so, right, as a communication professor, my version is going to be a rhetoric of science class, focusing on the concepts of evolution. And I have a colleague who's a historian of science, and he wants to do a history of evolution class using some of the material. And then I have a colleague who's a retired anthropologist, and she wants to do an anthropology of evolution class. And so we're hoping that at least some of us will be able to teach this class in the same semester, so that we can have some opportunities for all of our students to come together and talk about the shared material of the class, right? So I will have some rhetoric of science material, Bill Lynch will have some history of science material, there'll be some anthropology that we don't share, but then there'll be some of the key course videos and readings that we do share. And so hopefully we'll have a chance to bring students together from different institutions to talk in the way that we got to talk in the master class. So that's going to be one of my main focuses in the next year or so to
I'm
get that going.
very excited about that prospect. Just imagine that this is taught as a college course at multiple campuses with the students interacting with each other. And I forgot to feature it in my talk, it has been featured by the panelists, and a very, very important part of this was the breakout sessions.
Yes.
That at first there was, the person came and gave the talk, but this is, there's 80 people on the Zoom call. And to spend 15 minutes typically in breakout rooms with 3 to 4 people was essential, because it's there, as you said, that you really got to meet people one-on-one, express your own views, and that was taking place. And so I think that needs to be included as a design feature. Mm-hmm. And any offering like this is the opportunity to speak in terms of in small groups. That's not original, but if you're not doing it, then you need to be doing it.
Yeah, it's fun to reflect on this on the class and being here, both at this conference and here in Berkeley, and my own journey with science and spirituality. So I grew up like a liberal Christian, and then went towards evangelicalism. I thought, oh, here's people who are like, who believe in something that really changes how they live, and there's some passion there, and that kind of drew me in that direction. I always had some misgivings about it, so when I was heading off to college, it came down to Berkeley or Wheaton College in Illinois. And if you know both of those places, they are very, very different. I ended up going to Wheaton. What's that?
Two paths.
Two paths. Yeah. I took the one less travel. I don't know, but I took one, and so I went to Wheaton College, conservative evangelical college, and again, I always had misgivings with it. I studied theology, but then to like keep that grounded and applied, I did nursing as well. So those are my like, theology and nursing as the sort of applied part, and that's kind of how I was going forward. And I'll say my evangelicalism was sort of the progressive sort, if that's not too much of a contradiction in terms for people. There's a small minority that's kind of like politically progressive, but sort of religiously, theologically conservative. I was moving ahead in that, even got to the point where I was going to seminary, but always just the questions kind of never resolved, and eventually kind of moved out of that world and said, I'm done with it. At that point, the nursing work I was doing really had lost meaning, because it kind of, in a sense, depended on this spiritual framework. So I was kind of like, what do I do now? I had an interest though in psychology, so I just took the nursing over to psychiatric mental health nursing, became a psychiatric nurse practitioner. And then as part of that, I wanted to do some therapy, and I chose acceptance and commitment therapy because it brings in mindfulness, which had a little bit of that spirituality that I had come to appreciate. And then it was through that I came into Sloan Wilson's work with some of the developers of acceptance and commitment therapy. And by that time too, I was working with humanist communities. So the people who want to get together without God, kind of they do good things without God, they might say. And I saw how what David was doing with pro-social, so this mix of acceptance and commitment therapy, behavioral psychology, and Eleanor Ostrom in the Commons could be useful as something to give a little more substance to my humanist work. And I'm doing, and it's kind of maybe prompted me to do some more of that. So now I'm working with the humanist community in Minneapolis, Minnesota, while I have my psychiatry nursing practice on the side. And then using the pro-social stuff, taking that into into the group level within this humanist community. So anyway, that kind of gives you a sense of how I got to the course. So always this tension with science and spirituality, and so it's really fascinating to be at the place where we're talking about this person who really held those together. So the course was fascinating. I maybe was a little more drawn to the psychology portion. There were some of those folks that maybe caught my attention a little bit more. It was funny to think, like, sometimes when we were in the details of the science, I compared almost to when I was growing up, going through the Bible, reading Deuteronomy, right? A little too much on the details, but it's part of the history. It's important. It's relevant to the whole story. I don't know if it's just to keep joking here, if the course is going to be the initial canon of the third story. We'll find out, but it's in there, and there is that kind of sense of a story that, and again, coming from my sort of humanist place, a story that can work for a community like that, to have this sort of passionate engagement and progressivism in a non-theological expression, as I might say. So yeah, that's it.
Wow, and that was amazing. I wasn't expecting this to be as good as it was.
Highlight of the course.
No, it was incredible.
Are you going to give me a better grade now?
So good. We only have a few more minutes, and so I just want to open it up to the people here. And just how many more minutes do we have?
We have just a little under 15.
Come on.
Well, I want to jump in with Mariel because she and I sort of co-facilitated this music group, the Spotify list, and I have 2 music degrees and I do other things as well. But I was surprised when I started listening to it because I had this idea of the Noosphere that was based on Teilhard, and then I was listening to all this music and I'm like, well, wait, that's not the Noosphere, that's not it. And then it just kind of broke it open like, oh my gosh, we're not all on the same page.
Yeah.
We have so many views of the Noosphere that came across so clearly when you heard the music. And so, I really had to shift. And this.
I had the same experience.
Really, yeah.
And there's so many genres were included.
Yeah,
And so,
that hadn't come across as much in the class when we were having discussions as listening to the music. It's like, oh wow, there are all these views of the Noosphere. We're not all on the same page, and that was like a real eye opener to me. But it was, also really interesting and engaging.
yeah, and that's a wonderful observation. And I'd like to actually just proceed to the next person. Yeah.
I just had a question, what's in the future? Do you have another one lined up?
Well, I have a kind of what's in the future slide. I guess I can go to it, but we're just starting to ask this question because human energy has been consumed with the organization of conscience.
Yeah.
So that's point one. Grow a community around human energy. I think this was a case where human energy has been a small organization, and all of a sudden, boom, there were like 150 people that were wanting to remain engaged, nurture, incubator for projects. Because when it comes to doing things, then that involves forming into groups, and those groups being effective, to be capacitated, and to serve as a incubator. Repeat the online course, diversify the audience, and on this afternoon, we'll have some data to share on who took this course. And it's a very special and for the most part high capacity group. We're just started out basically on the commitment side of the watershed. And so there's a very interesting question as to how do we actually diversify the audience, and teaching it as a college course, I think, is a big step in that direction. Mariel, what you've done with the copper course is admirable, and we'd love to repeat that act. And so I think that much to talk about there. So that's what's on the list. But I mean, really, the first bullet point on it there, just starting to ask that question, is the most important. Yeah. Alan.
I want to follow up the conversation we began just before we began, which is the dignity of the mundane. With the expression, the mundane being the simple act of people talking to each other in the real life, breathing together, thinking together, pondering together. And is that not the heart of Teilhard's notion, that it is through introspection and the mundane reality of people talking with each other in a genuine way that we create a cultural movement? And so that's my reflection. My question is, how do you understand what you've done as a fractal? And I include the 3 job classes.
Yeah. I think that you really made an important point, and there is a sense in which you can create what I call a scaffold. We do this all the time. In fact, we try to do it every time in our projects at Pro-Social World, is to create a multi-level structure for continuing interactions. And that multi-level structure begins with individuals, level 1, who form into small teams, level 2, representing organizations, level 3, that expect to work with each other, level 4. It can be taken to scale by adding organizations. And what impresses me so much is that just by creating that scaffold, before you do anything specific, is setting up lines of communication, which is amazing all by itself. Because now people just have the lines of communication to talk. And I think that that's not exactly what happened with the masterclass, but it was close. And so I think that to recognize that and the generality of it allows you to provide the scaffold with the specific content varying. And so I take the point that this particular series of videos was like a bit like reading Deuteronomy. That's an amazing comparison. And so that's not sacrosanct. Those particular videos, and that's a great thing. Yeah.
I'd like to follow on that and share a point that I hope that you steal, and I'm happy to workshop this more if you need more detail about it. But a technique that I picked up from Bible study at Berkeley was to say nice things about each other at the end of the season. And it's something that I do at Counter Course, is I have my group, and usually it'll be about 10 people who've been there the whole time. And on the Zoom call, we'll have one person be the person of focus, and everyone will sort of it's optional, so everyone popcorns in, and usually everyone speaks. They say what they appreciate about that person during the time. And what I've done is taken the transcript, the Zoom transcript, fed it to ChatGPT, and last season I had ChatGPT write everyone a sonnet. So everyone got the double experience. They got to see everyone say what they appreciate about them. Because people grow quite strong bonds, and then ChatGPT made it a sonnet. And for me, it was the first time receiving a sonnet.
I'm shocked.
I highly recommend that practice.
And
it would really tie up with what we went through this season. I think that there's so much that people have left unstated. I mean, we just had that one with Lauren. Lauren deserves a sonnet for that.
Truly. So, I mean, these are such great points. And one of which there is so much wisdom in religion, traditional religion, such as evangelicalism. And we might want to reject parts of it, but other parts we just want to learn from. And so, and I'm blessed to have studied religion very seriously now for more than 20 years, and to have really absorbed the wisdom of the wisdom traditions for both the inner life and the outer life, and especially. And so part of that is mutual appreciation. And just the feeling of being blessed, the whole concept of worship and sacredness. Sacredness, what does it mean to hold something sacred? It means you acknowledge you're part of something larger than yourself, that thing is more important than you, and that you therefore exist to serve it. That's the sacred attitude. And it can be understood in purely evolutionary terms. It's the state of mind of being part of something larger than yourself, is what it is. And so I think that is so important, to have a respectful attitude towards all cultural forms that work. And the great bushy tree of cultural evolution is like the great bushy tree of biological evolution. And if something is there and is endured, there's something to learn from it. Just like we have a respect for all life forms, we should have a respect for all cultural forms. And that's an attitude, I mean, what a wonderful attitude that is for dialogue between forms. And now, what's our time?
4 minutes.
So I did want to make one point having to do with heterogeneity. Because one thing you might say is that, we came into the course with differences, and then there's this wonderful unification. But and I think that was true to an extent, but actually that's not necessarily to be expected or desired. And I have a parable on this. It's the parable of the echidna and the hedgehog. So the echidna and the hedgehog look much alike. One was evolved in Australia, the other evolved in Europe, but they converged ecologically, and so they look alike. They have spiny skins, they have the same diet and stuff like that. But don't try to interbreed them. They've converged in some respects. In other respects, they remain oceans apart. And I think that when you think of that, apply that to worldviews, that you and we have different worldviews, they both animate us, they both cause us to do things. We might have convergence in what we decide to do, such as to work towards the welfare of the whole earth. but what animates us on the inside might be different. So different that if you mix them at all, you should be very careful about it. Isn't that interesting? That when we think about convergent cultural evolution, there's a combination of similarity and difference. And so what you might find yourself working for is deciding to disagree, agreeing to disagree. That I'm animated on the inside in a different way than you are. And I'm not going to try to change that, because to do that would just really involve some, and that took place in the course. But at the same time, we're both working towards the noosphere or something like that. And so that understanding and tolerance of differences and to collaborate, well, isn't that interesting? That to me is very, very interesting. And the parable of the echidna and the hedgehog, I think, brings it out. And the fact that I should be trying to speak in parables shows that I'm a wannabe preacher.
It's a monotone, and then the hedgehog is at the center.
Yeah.
So you're saying something very deep about cultural evolution, that it draws us apart much more than our biological evolution, because we are less diverse than some subsections of baboons, like some subtribes,
Right.
like genetically. So
Yeah.
you're making a comparison to an extreme and fairly deep within mammals genetic difference, and
Oh.
saying that our cultures are that different.
You bet.
Okay.
You know, and I've had that experience. I had a bruising experience. It was wonderful and bruising when we collaborated with Plum Village, Thich Nhat Hanh's monastery in Plum Village. And so we were working together for spirituality, science, and action. And it resulted in a very deep conversation with Brother Phap Lin, a senior monk at Plum Village. But this encounter was not just like we come to Plum Village and we experience their retreat. You know, that was, would be coming on their terms. It would be, we were coming to Plum Village to really kind of compare the way we do things. And that was like an echidna trying to mate with a hedgehog. It was really interesting. We can talk more about that. And it was very useful. And that conversation, which I'll provide the link to, reflects that. So it was not just kumbaya. It was just like,
But cultural evolution evolves much faster than genetic evolution as far as mammals go. So
yes.
we also have more flexibility.
We do. No, we do. And we actually can do that integration. And genetic evolution often, one of the biggest sources of biological novelty is hybridization. Different species made. And that creates a burst of variation. So this is all, I think, and among other things, demonstrates the utility of thinking of the great bushy tree of cultural evolution as much like the great bushy tree of biological evolution, but of course with important differences. You don't look for a point-for-point comparison. But I think it affirms what Teilhard was all about. And that's what he said. I mean, he said in his own words, imagine the great bushy tree of biological life growing slowly. And then one twig begins to proliferate so rapidly that in no time at all it overtops the entire goddamn tree. And yes, there is a danger of us and our domesticated animals just overcrowding everything else. He said that. And surprisingly, he didn't comment on it in terms of whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. I think he really,
that's pretend, like kind of hard to avoid that.
Well, I mean, I think attention in this group is to what extent the noosphere remains just, human dominated, as opposed to we really must act as stewards of the earth. Biodiversity really must be part of our responsibility to provide an environmental focus to the noosphere is something which many of us want. And I think nobody I think very few would argue against it, but I think many people are just so human-centered that it's just not as baked in as it needs to be. So I think that's one conversation that we should have.
I just want to add, there's hints in his writing that humans could be an invasive species, and that he's focusing on what introspection and the nervous system can do.
Yeah.
but it's not simply to say we're at the top of the hierarchy and the best.
Yeah.
And so it's a very subtle tension. And I don't know if I've seen anyone really pick up on his hints.
Well, here's a case where I say it doesn't matter what he thought.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, truly,
That's right.
truly. And I think I'm going to make the point. I'm going to make the point on Sunday's plenary. There's a very important sense in which, when we look around, just like the people that was featured in the video, or yesterday at the business meeting, we featured two amazing people, Bob Chapman and another gentleman whose name I need reminding.
Jay Jacob.
What's that?
Jay Jacob.
Jay Jacob. And they both talked about amazing Noosphere things that they're doing in the business world. And they never heard of Tehar, or they only heard the name. And so the question on our part is, do we have to school them in Tehar?
Yeah.
When in fact, they're the ones that we're schooling us in terms of what they're doing? In some cases, the answer to that should be no, it's not necessary. So if Tehar is not your cup of tea, then please, let's develop other ways of working towards his vision of worldwide cooperation, basically, a worldwide superorganism. You can say that without saying the word Tehar.
Well, I can't imagine him wanting anyone to be Sharkinian. You know,
Yeah.
and his whole orientation was to live in the mystery, to wonder, to
Yeah.
evolve. But it just, because he was a Catholic priest, the idea that he might think of humans as an invasive species is the part I was pointing to, that whether he's right or wrong, or it doesn't matter. I think his work could be misunderstood as elevating the human as
Right.
above all, and I don't think it should be seen that way.
Yeah, so Peter, we're past time, but we don't need to stop.
Yeah.
Peter.
One, as we speak about, are we kind of, one way of not getting maybe closed off around the concept of the noosphere being just human consciousness is, I love to imagine how the intelligence of every life form, actually the intelligence of also prior to life forms, how all of this has found entry into us, right? So I mean, our own form of intelligence and consciousness has this entire history of other earlier and other intelligences and consciousnesses. The first time that I had this thought, it was comical. I was sitting at my computer, and I began to strain. I could feel it. I began to just kind of get all into my frontal lobes and strain, and it didn't feel good. So all of a sudden, the thought popped up in me that said, "Well, wait a minute. I have the intelligence. I have the intelligence of a tiger. So why don't I just kind of draw from a bit wider intelligence, And this thought came unbidden. And then later I reflected. Since then I've reflected more about this. But I believe that is another very important aspect for us to consider. That not only have we evolved the self-conscious, this capacity for self-conscious consciousness, but we are a whole ecosystem of different intelligences and consciousnesses right here in the individual, in our groups.
Yeah.
And I find that a very invigorating thought.
Well, Ed Young's book, The Immense World, is about that. Is about, in fact, the Umwelt, the world of other species. And but I think what we could add on to that, which makes it even more exciting, is that that's also true for our different cultural forms. And so in just the same way that our dogs see a different world than ourselves, not to speak of bats and whales and wolves and so on, that's also true for our different cultural forms. And so, but it's not as if we can't comprehend it. So it's not insurmountable. But to realize that our respective Umwelts are so different that it requires that effort, the recognition and effort. And then that is, so to extend that concept, first of all, to absorb it for different species, and then to extend it to cultural diversity is part of what we're doing. All good. So thank you.